Hey everybody. I'm going to talk about a few things related to, I guess, in fleet battles in general. First is 3v3s. So we have, several teams in 3PO. Um, and so I just want to talk a little bit about what you have to do in a 3v3. Now, the way the settings work is the shields are the same on everything, but the uh, cap ship hulls are reduced. On the raiders, it's 60%, and on the flagship and capital ships, it's 80%. So, in general, this makes shield stripping like maintain a high importance, but full on damage a little less. But what it comes down to is you have to do the same things as in a 5v5, but you only have 3 people to do them. And so, you just have to sacrifice something and make do with the best of what you got. And I would say, like, the way most teams are playing is you're going to have 2 farmers and 1 flex, or 2 flex and 1 farmer. But 3PO does not have a, like, settled meta. It is not clear what's the best way to play. I'm pretty sure it's map dependent, and I'll get into that a bit. And I've seen players even run a support, and they do it quite successfully. And everything seems to work that I've seen people try. But I'll note some general things. In terms of winning the opening, 2 bombers helps with that because the farm is just kind of the biggest thing to win openings. Especially on maps where it's easy to farm on, I think 2 bombers is usually the way to go. 2 flexes or 1 flex and a support, and that support would run beacons. Their PK is much stronger. It's hard to kill evasive players, like top level players, with just 1 flex. On Empire, you can get away with it, like a defender taking out a Y-wing, but otherwise it's just really hard. So on maps where the farming is weaker, I would say the having more PK power seems to do better. Well, one thing it also does is it makes killing the raider easier, because normally your bombers aren't running any kind of ions. So stripping the shields can be a little hassle with 1 flex, especially if you don't have a support. Or, if you run 1 flex and 2 bombers, you don't have a support. So if you're running ion torpedo, ion missile, you have to resupply your torpedo and you only get 1, and that can be like a hassle. And if you don't resupply it, you're stripping the raider with like 1 ion missile and then lots of laser fire, because the ion missile has a long cooldown. It's like 20 seconds. So having 2 flexes or a flex and a support makes it easier to kill the raider. On easy to farm maps like Yavin, like I said, like 2 bombers I think are the way to go. Harder to farm maps, PK is good. One thing I think is strong is, specifically on Empire, is to run a support with resupply and 2 TIE bombers. And the support could actually carry ion torpedoes, because they actually get 3 of them. So it's not a huge problem for them to resupply themselves the way it is for an X-Wing or a TIE fighter. And so what this ends up creating is, like, that support with resupply makes the TIE bombers really hard to kill, just like in a 5v5. And so you just kind of have very strong objective power. And I think on maps like Yavin or Esselis, I think this might be like the best way to play it on Empire. It feels really strong. I've played in some games with it. I've seen other people do it in like the Zillow division, the highest level division in 3PO. It just feels really strong because you can keep up with any farm. Your damage output is high, and you're just very hard to kill. And your support just does the shield stripping, and your TIE bombers just do tons of damage. And I sort of mentioned this with a 1 flex and 2 bomber. Ions and you're going to have some trouble with ions. So normally if you have 1 flex, you'll run with an ion missile and an ion torpedo. The problem becomes you only have 1 ion torpedo, your ion missile cooldown is long, So stripping shields can be a problem, because if the ion torpedo gets shot, or you just don't have one because you used it already, you know, you're just kind of slow on shield stripping. So when you play with one flex, you need to be on top of like making sure you have an ion torp if you need it. If you're playing with one bomber, it can hurt your opening and your general farm. So if you play with two flexes, you want to make sure they're very good at disrupting the enemy farm on the opening. And that probably means splitting up your flexes. The way I've seen two flex teams do it is one will go on each bomber and they'll try to stop the farm so that their one bomber can keep up with two. One thing I've personally been doing is uh, running like two farm on the opening, and then when I die, I'll switch to a flex. And kind of the idea is, if I don't die, like, we're probably going to win the game. If I do die, then I switch to a flex mid game, and then I have sort of a different like style, a more PK heavy style as the game gets later. Oh, and I didn't mention this with one flex and two bombers. This is something I haven't experimented or seen anyone do. But one idea is, instead of running the ion torp, run a flex with ion laser and ion missile. And the idea is they would maintain shield stripping like all the time with their ion laser. And so this would be a very objective focused. And maybe, like, say on New Republic on Yavin, this might be a good way to play. You know, you go your two Y-Wings for farm, and your one X-Wing might run Ion Laser, Ion Missile, and then say, like, Proton Torp or something. But I haven't experimented with that, and I can't say how good it is. But the key thing I want everyone to think about is, like, play to your team's strengths. You know, you can make almost anything work, especially because right now we don't have a single team in Zillow. We might next season, but we don't right now. So, like, you know, you can easily work your way up to the top teams in the game because they're actually all doing all these different things. Um, so, you know, don't feel like you have to play a certain way in 3v3s. Think about what your capabilities are and sort of the style that your team wants to play. I will say one thing about, in general, because you have to cover several roles, it's important that people play more flexible. And this doesn't necessarily mean switching ships. It could just mean that, like, if you're running two bombers and one flex, you want like one of the bombers to have some player killing power, because there are going to be situations where you need player kills to defend, and the flex alone is going to have a hard time. So it's good if the bombers can help with that, you know, to some capacity. And similarly, you know, if you have two flexes and one bomber, like, that bomber needs to really farm and only farm. You can't really sacrifice your one farmer to do something else. So the two flexes have to make sure that they're killing the raider, and if necessary, they're protecting the bomber. One thing that's different in 3v3 is PK is more common, and that's because if you kill a player, you know, a third of your like players are out of the game. So on offense, player killing is more common, and if you're running with only one bomber, you have to be careful that they don't get picked off on defense, and that your defense suddenly like stops because you're not getting any more farm to change the morale. Um, but that's all I have to say on 3v3s. This was a shorter video, but thanks for listening. In this document and another video, I will talk about some specific things on defending in fleet battles.